small piece of yellow metal found in a North California mill stream in 1894 precipitated the gold rush. At that time, San Francisco was home to 459 inhabitants. By the end of the following year, the population was almost 25,000. The 49ers, named after the year, 1849, when they arrived, came from all over the world. They were dreamers, schemers, adventurers, young and old, but all turning up with the single ambition of striking it rich. Gold was everywhere, and the streets of towns such as Columbia, Sierra City, Hangtown, and that crown jewel of cities, San Francisco, were literally paved with gold. While life was fast and hard, so was justice. The miners, whores, and saloon keepers were a rough bunch. There were fights over mining claims and fights over women. Stealing was an easier way to obtain the much sought-after precious gold than laboring all day, panning in a muddy streambed. Participants in the gold rush drank heavily and gambled unwisely. They also killed each other. By the time California became a state, in 1850, it needed a state prison, so they built San Quentin. Driving north on U.S. Highway 101, from the Golden Gate Bridge to Interstate 580, San Quentin comes into view as a massive white concrete construction on a 30-acre site. Originally called Point Quentin, the isolated area was named after a minor Indian chief who lost a battle against Mexican soldiers in 1824. Squat buttressed walls with a red roof. This is a correctional cathedral set in green flatland that tips into the North San Francisco Bay Area. The California Department of Corrections has an annual operating budget in excess of $3.4 billion, with around 124,000 inmates being confined at any one time. San Quentin, also known as SSQ, is not only the most notorious prison in the state, it is arguably the toughest in the country. It houses the state's death row, where at any one time, up to 500 men may be awaiting execution. These days, in a gesture towards more humane methods, death is administered by lethal injection. Douglas Daniel Clark is one of these death row inmates. He costs about $50 a day to keep fit and well for his execution. It is a 500-yard walk from the gate of Skew to the menacing front portico. Once through this entry and just 30 feet down a corridor is an interview room. Opposite, there is a secure holding area, and a tirade of foul language is issued by Clark, who is chained to a strong point on the wall. He is also shackled, handcuffed to a body belt, and his ankles are bound with steel chain. Forget Dr. Hannibal Lecter, because Clark looks the epitome of evil, and he is not acting. His blue eyes are wild and demonic. His hair is unkempt and prematurely gray, but it is mouth that is so foul in every way. The teeth in it are rotten, and he spouts an incessant stream of venomous filth. Assisted by guards, he shuffles forward to meet his visitor, with intimidating hatred emanating from every inch of his powerfully built 6-foot frame. He is wearing a gray prison sweater and loosely fitting slacks, and a baseball cap is perched cockeyed on his head. He is also sweating profusely. However repulsive they may be, looks and foul language don't make a killer, and as Clark's story unfolded, it would prove to become an enthralling whodunit. Moreover, his life may even be a monument to the frustrated protestations of an innocent man. During the summer months of 1980, a string of horrifying murders rocked Hollywood. All of the victims were hookers, trading sex for dollars along the notorious Sunset Boulevard. This prompted the press to dub the as-yet unknown serial killer the Sunset Slayer. The principal players in this dance of death were Carol Mary Bundy, Douglas Daniel Clark, and John Jacks Robert Murray. Carol Bundy, no relation to the serial killer Ted Bundy, is short and unattractive. Her mother Gladys was part Algonquin Indian, and her father, Charles Peters, was a French-Canadian with a build that might be described as roly-poly. Carol once remarked that he was a male version of me with a bald head. He had blue eyes, a pleasant appearance, and a dynamite personality. He was a good father. He worshipped me because I was bright. Born in 1943, Carol was the second of 3 children, and the family lived in various cities across the USA. She claims to have attended 23 different schools before the 9th grade. By the age of 11, she had already started shoplifting and stealing money from her parents and neighbors. Gladys Peters died of a heart attack on Sunday, the 10th of June, 1957. The following night, Carol says she was in bed with her father, who performed oral sex on me and sexually abused my 11-year-old sister. One night, just after her 16th birthday, she was sent out to a local store by her father to buy provisions. When she arrived home, she claims, she found globs of blood everywhere and a rifle on a chair. She explained that her father, who was remarried by then, couldn't take life anymore and had planned to commit murder. That's why he sent me to the store, she said. He was going to kill his new wife while I was gone, then kill me when I got home. Apparently, the plan literally backfired when he and his wife wrestled with the rifle, which discharged, blowing off his thumb. After this incident, Carol's stepmother arranged for the children to be taken to a foster home. This was a temporary arrangement, for then they were packed off to Indiana to live with an uncle. 2 years later, Charles Peters hanged himself. He was 52. Carol was married in 1960 to a 33-year-old pimp whom she had known for 2 weeks. The marriage had lasted only 6 days when Carol left, because her husband apparently wanted her to have sex with his friends. She was not prepared to tolerate that sort of treatment, although she later told psychiatrists that she had been involved in sex for gain before marrying, and also claimed to have been a prostitute in Portland, Oregon, in the mid-60s. Following her divorce from the pimp, Carol says she tried to pull her life together by attending the Santa Monica City College, where she studied to become a vocational nurse. Unfortunately, the college is unable to support her claim that she graduated class in 1968. The following year, she married a hospital orderly called Grant Bundy. This marriage lasted 11 years, and the couple had 2 boys. But Grant was a women beater, and court records show that in January 1979, Carol sought refuge in a battered women's shelter before leaving him and going on welfare. She attempted suicide on 2 occasions after taking a job as a licensed vocational nurse at the Valley Medical Center in Los Angeles. Carol, now overweight, moved with her 2 children to Valerio Gardens, an apartment block in Van Nuys, which was managed by Jack Murray. John Jack Murray, full name John Robert Murray, was a 41-year-old Australian who lived with his wife and 2 children. He had a reputation as a ladies' man, and in no time at all, he and Carol were in the throes of an affair. Recently divorced from her second husband, whom she called a homosexual screaming faggot, Bundy received half the sale proceeds of her previous home. This was a substantial amount, and Randy Murray, to give him a more appropriate name, soon got wind of Carol's good fortune. Lavishing love, care, and attention over her, Murray encouraged her to have her eyesight examined. She had appalling vision, to the extent that she was subsequently declared blind and therefore eligible for monthly disability payments from the Social Security. Murray was not known for being a philanthropist or even charitable, for he conned money out of his friends and frequently cheated on his wife. On one occasion, he was caught pocketing wads of notes from a telethon charity collection with which he had been involved. And there is no doubt that Bundy's disability payments found their way to Murray's pocket, too. When he eventually learned of Carol's sizable bank account, The relationship changed direction, becoming one of prostitute and punter in reverse. Now completely infatuated with Murray, she started paying him for sex, and by the end of that year, he had wheedled $18,000 out of her on the grounds that he needed the money for his wife's non-existent cancer operation. In reality, he used half to pay off the outstanding debt on his Chevrolet van, a vehicle that he frequently used as his mobile sex den. The balance was used to refurbish the vehicle's interior. By Christmas 1979, Bundy was so obsessed with Murray's sadosexual performances on her that she approached his unsuspecting wife, offering her $1,500 in exchange for her husband. The woman was so furious that she insisted that Bundy vacate the apartment complex, while Jack timidly agreed to keep the peace. For him, it was a matter of selfish economics, as his wife cooked his meals and laundered his clothes, services he could not afford to lose. Also, from a purely cynical viewpoint, Carol was simply his subservient sex partner. Now that he had acquired most of her money, she was of no further use to him. Nevertheless, he did arrange for her to move into an apartment on Lemona Avenue, Van Nuys, and some 3 miles from his home. On arriving at Lemona Avenue in May 1980, Carol was immediately attracted to a neighbor's 11-year-old daughter called Shannon. The girl was mentally and physically well developed, and the unlikely pair established a relationship by trading adult jokes. Inevitably, this arrangement took on a sexual dimension, and Bundy encouraged the minor to cross the bridge from gentle petting and cuddling to full-blown lesbianism. Despite their apparent split, Jack and Carol continued their clandestine affair, but in a less evident manner. Progressively, the sex turned increasingly deviant, and the couple tried to encourage other young girls to indulge in 3-way sex with them. Fortunately, they were all put off by Bundy's unsavory looks, and now totally dejected, she took her 2 sons out of school and sent them to the Midwest to live with their father's parents. Carol Bundy, that half-blind bitch, she shit-canned her kids and sent them in a handbasket to hell. Douglas Clark, during his interview at San Quentin State Prison. Douglas Clark had been born Daniel Clark in 1948 in Pennsylvania, where his father, Franklin, was stationed in the Navy. He was the 3rd son of 5 children. In the 3rd grade, he decided that he wanted to be called Doug instead of Daniel. The family moved regularly from Pennsylvania to Seattle, to Berkeley, and Japan. By 1958, Franklin had retired from the Navy as a lieutenant commander. In 1959, he moved with his wife Blanche and their children, Frank Jr., Carol Ann, Doug, and John Runlin, to Kwajalein, an atoll in the Marshall Islands, where he took up a civilian position running the supply department for the Transport Company of Texas. Blanche worked as a radio controller. They spent 2 years in Kwajalein, living a life of colonial privilege, in a housing complex that was built specifically for the many American families who lived on the atoll. When they returned to America, they lived in Berkeley for a short time before moving to India. The Clarks lived in a manner reserved for only the very wealthy back in the States, with a number of servants who would wait dutifully on the children and parents alike. Other Americans living in the area described the Clark family as pleasant people who kept themselves to themselves. As for Doug, none could remember any startling behavior problems, although they had found that if Doug was ever in trouble for any of the usual childhood pranks, his father would defend him aggressively, refusing to acknowledge his son's responsibility for his behavior. Later, both Walter and Doug were sent to Écolate, the international school in Geneva, attended by the children of UN diplomats, international celebrities, and European and Middle Eastern royalty. Unlike his brother Walt, who was popular and outgoing, Doug was considered sullen and arrogant and made few friends. He did not do well with his studies as he couldn't be bothered to do the work or complete assignments. Doug Clark claimed that he had developed his preferences for kinky sex while living in Geneva. He was expelled from Écolot for this reason. After he left Geneva, 16-year-old Doug was sent to Culver Military Academy in Indiana. Frank Jr. and Carol Ann had already left home by this time, and Walt was sent to a boarding school in Arizona. John Runlin joined him there later. Doug's parents continued to move around the world, first to Venezuela, then Perth, Western Australia. Although intelligent, Doug Clark was happy to scrape through his schooling with minimal effort. He was involved in a number of sports and played saxophone in the dance band. In the 3 years that he attended the academy, he did not have any close friends. Instead, he hung around with a group of kids who shared Doug's disdain for authority and had a distinct don't-give-a-fuck attitude. He would boast of his family's wealth and sexual exploits, oblivious to his friends' annoyance and boredom. The fact that most of his classmates refused to mix with him and would often avoid contact with him altogether did not seem to bother him at all. Doug's behavior and attitude led to many meetings with the school therapist, Colonel Gleason, despite the fact that Gleason had written many letters informing the Clarks of their son's bad conduct. They showed no concern. In the time he was there, he only received one visit from his mother. The only visit his father made occurred while the lad was on holiday. Like most teenage boys, Doug and his classmates were obsessed with teenage girls and the fantasy of sex, but for Doug, it was much more than fantasy. He would often bring a girl to his room where he would record their moans and groans as he had sex with them. He would then replay the tapes to his classmates, reveling in the obvious jealousy. Aged 17, Doug claimed to meet the love of his life at a Culver dance, where he took her away from another boy. Despite his claims to have been in love with Bobby, he would take photographs of them having sex and pass them around the school, enjoying the notoriety that they brought him. In 1967, at the age of 19, Clark graduated from Culver and went to live with his parents, who were now retired and living in Yosemite. When he was drafted, he enlisted in the Air Force in radio intelligence to ensure that he would not end up in the front line in the Vietnam War. He went first to Texas and then Anchorage, Alaska, where he was given the job of decoding Russian messages. The military discipline in Anchorage reminded him of Culver, and he resented his senior officers' corrections, but the city life made up for it. He spent most of his time in the many dancer bars where he would nurture his ego as he left each night with one of the dancers hanging on his arm. Before his term was up, Douglas Clark left the Air Force with an honorable discharge, a National Defense Service Medal, and his benefits intact. What the events were that led up to this are unknown, as his story is different every time he tells it, and the Air Force will not reveal anything. Doug claims that he had been witness to the murder of a black man by a white man, and that he had fled when he was called in for questioning. With over $5,000, Doug planned to drive from Alaska to the Mexican border, but stopped when he got to Van Nuys in Los Angeles, where he moved in with his sister, Carol Ann, who was living with her abusive husband. At 24, he met and later married 27-year-old Beverly in a North Hollywood bar. Blonde and heavy, the woman saw herself as fat and ugly, but felt that Doug, with his big dreams and ambitions, would always try to build her up. They bought a car upholstery business, which Doug ran, while Beverly had a job and did the books at weekends. He insisted that he was the one with the intelligence, not she, and refused to listen to any advice she gave about the business. Whenever they began to get ahead financially, Doug would quickly blow it. During the 70s, the business began to falter, so they sold it. To pay off their debts, Doug worked in a gas station and as a security guard. before he started buying goods at auctions to resell at swap meets. Beverly had the job of loading and unloading the truck because, in his opinion, he was a better salesperson than she was. Although Beverly could not exactly say what went wrong in the marriage, she did say that Doug was lazy. She would not consider the fact that he liked to wear her underwear as any more unusual than his desire to try wife swapping or three-way sex. As Beverly gained more weight during their marriage, Doug spent less and less time at home, preferring to go to bars. According to Carol Ann, her brother drank heavily and would become over-anxious and angry when drunk. Beverly would deny this, even though she had persuaded him to join Alcoholics Anonymous as a condition of them staying together. He kept off the booze for 2 years. Doug was ambitious but could not commit himself to the work that was required to achieve the success he longed for. It had been Beverly's suggestion that he apply to work for the city as a steam plant trainee. He agreed and actually completed the training course. In 1976, 4 years after they were married, Doug and Beverly separated and later divorced, although they remained close friends. Douglas Clark began work at the Jurgen Soap Factory in 1979. His duties as an engineer required him to tend the large boiler. While not befitting his level of education, he enjoyed the sense of power that controlling the 3-story structure gave him. In February 1980, Clark set fire to his car outside the factory while he was working the night shift in order to claim the insurance. He later bragged to Carol Bundy that the real reason was to destroy evidence. By the time he met Bundy, Clark had developed quite a talent for insinuating himself into the lives of fat, unattractive women who would willingly give him free rent, food, and money in return for the attention he gave them. When the women demanded more in return, he would quickly leave them and move on to the next lonely soul. Just after the Christmas of 1979, Carol Bundy, then aged 37, met Doug Clark at the Little Nashville Country Club, where Murray sang Tom Jones hits. Douglas Daniel Clark was a boiler engineer by trade, but he was a tradesman with his incredibly smooth manner. He was also well-read and liked to sprinkle his conversation with quotations from Shakespeare and French phrases. 31-year-old Clark was a handsome man with a soft, slightly European speaking voice, a gift which enabled him to have the pick of any woman he chose. He was a leech and a sexual hedonist who enjoyed nothing more than a varied choice of eager girlfriends who were willing to share their home with him. Indeed, at times he was so much in demand, he would even forget where he was actually living himself. On the evening of their first meeting, Carol Bundy and Douglas Clark spent the night together. On learning of Doug's rent problems with his landlady, Carol offered him lodgings in her apartment. For a short period, the arrangement was mutually satisfactory. Put simply, Clark traded his body and sex for a roof over his head. Eventually, he came to the view that cash for sex would be more agreeable to him. During his brief stay at Lemona Avenue, Bundy introduced Clark to her sexual playmate Shannon. The tempting proximity of the sexually advanced youngster, and prompted by Carol's encouragement for three-way sex, proved irresistible to Clark. Bundy photographed him simulating sex with the made-up child, an exposure which would later prove to be his undoing. During an interview at San Quentin State Prison, Clark ranted on about the subject, saying, "I had sex with Bundy about 3 times in all our relationship," although Carol will say otherwise. Murray was her intense S&M lover. She and Jack had sex with the 11-year-old. He tried to orally and vaginally rape the kid. They repeatedly tried to engage my roommate, Nancy, in three-way sex. Carol even tried to get Nancy to join her and Shannon in three-way female sex. She told Nancy and Shannon not to let me know she was busy with Jack. trying to have sex with them, since I would not like her and her lover fucking around with one of my girlfriends. The first confirmed murders committed by the Sunset Slayer were the double killing of 15-year-old Gina Morano and 16-year-old Cynthia Chandler. The naked bodies of the two attractive teenagers were found on an incline off the Ventura Freeway by a Caltrans street cleaner on Thursday, the 12th of June, 1980. The medical examiner established that they had died the previous day. Cynthia was killed by a single .25 caliber gunshot wound to the back of her head, which had left the bullet lodged in her brain, and a second shot had penetrated her lung, bursting open her heart. It was also determined that both shots had been fired at point-blank range. Gina had also been shot twice. One round entered behind her left ear, exiting near her right eyebrow, and the second bullet blasted through the back of her head, also exiting behind the left ear. At around 8:00 p.m., on Saturday, the 14th of June, a woman called the LAPD Northeast Division at Van Nuys. She told a detective that she thought her lover was a murderer. "What I'm trying to do," she said while officers recorded the call, "is to ascertain whether or not the individual I know, who happens to be my lover, did in fact do this. He said he did. My name is Betsy." Later in the same call, she changed her name to Claudia. The police were anxious to learn the full name of the alleged killer. The informant refused to give out this vital information, but when pressed, she did give a brief description. "He has curly brown hair and blue eyes. His Christian name is John, and he's 41 years old," she added. "I found a duffel bag in his car full of bloody blankets, paper towels, and his clothes." This description matched Jack Murray perfectly, and not Clark, who was only 37 at the time. Warming now to her theme, the woman added, "He tells me he fired 4 shots, 2 in one girl's head, and virtually blew her head away. 1 shot in the head and 1 shot in the chest of the other girl. He used a .25 caliber pistol. Does that jibe with what you've got?" When the caller hung up, a detective wrote on the tape cassette, "Either the killer or one who knows the killer." Over the following days, investigators compiled a list of people who had purchased .25 caliber pistols in recent months. Carol Mary Bundy's name came up, for she had purchased 2.22 caliber Raven automatics in Van Nuys on Friday, the 25th of April. In fact, she was the only female on the register. The gun shop provided the police with her address, vehicle registration, and social security number. Amazingly, the police chose to ignore this crucial information, despite the previous telephone call from a woman indicating a connection with 2 of the murders. Quite why the police chose to act this way would remain a mystery for some time to come. Meanwhile, on Saturday, the 22nd of June, Bundy moved from her apartment to Verdugo Avenue in Burbank. Clark, among others, helped her by taking her furniture and other possessions across town to her new home, which was a stone's throw from his place of employment at the Jergens soap factory. At 3:05 a.m. the next day, a Burbank police officer found the fully clothed body of prostitute Karen Jones lying in the gutter of a residential street near the NBC studios in Hollywood. She had been shot in the temple with a .25 caliber pistol, and there were indications that she had been thrown from a moving vehicle. Ballistic tests on a bullet retrieved from her head at autopsy proved that it matched in every respect the same bullets that had killed both Chandler and Morano. Later that same morning, and just a few miles away in a Sizzler diner parking lot, police found the headless corpse of Exie Wilson, another hooker. The body, which had been dragged behind a trash dumpster, was naked and lying in a pool of congealing blood. Wilson and Jones both shared the same pimp, and he reported that he had last seen them, both alive, shortly before midnight. They had been together. During the late hours of Thursday, the 26th of June, a resident drove into the driveway of his home in Studio City and found an ornate wooden chest obstructing his access. "I'd thought I'd found some treasure," he later told police. But upon opening the chest, the man was horrified to find a severed head, which had been wrapped up in a t-shirt and jeans. At autopsy, it was determined that Exie had been shot with a .22 caliber bullet. The head had been washed and makeup roughly applied. It had also been refrigerated after decapitation, which had taken place while she was still alive. There were traces of what appeared to be semen in her throat. The recovered bullet matched in every respect the bullets that had been used to kill Marano, Chandler, and Wilson. Snake hunters were out looking for trophies in a ravine in the hillside country near Foothill Boulevard in Sylmar on Sunday, the 29th of June, when they found the body of 17-year-old prostitute Marnette Comer, partially naked and covered with scrub. The corpse, which had been dehydrated and mummified in the summer heat, was lying on its stomach. It was determined at autopsy that she had been shot 3 times in the chest with a .25 caliber pistol, and her belly had been slit open. Marnette had last been seen alive on the 31st of May. The bullets recovered matched in every respect the rounds that had killed all of the other previous victims. By now, the police had traced the ornate chest to a Newberry's store in Reseda, where a clerk remembered the customer being an overweight woman who wore glasses with thick lenses and short black gloves. The sales assistant especially remembered the gloves because it had been a very hot day. "She was dumpy and kinda ugly," the clerk told police. By now, the clues floating around as to the identity of the mystery informant called Claudia were adding up. 5 hookers had been shot with the same .25 caliber pistol, and the description of the buyer of the chest matched that of Carol Bundy, the only woman in the whole of California who owned 2 Raven pistols. Yet still the police couldn't match up these leads. On the 29th of July, Bundy started to deteriorate mentally. She begged Clark to shoot her. When he refused, she attempted suicide. She sat in her Datsun car and injected herself with insulin and Librium. Then she swallowed a handful of sleeping pills. Despite her knowledge of drugs gained from her nursing experience, the suicide attempt failed, and she was found and taken to hospital. The next day, her first action was to telephone Jack Murray from her hospital bed and ask him to pick her up in his van. When they met, she saw that he was accompanied by a woman called Nancy Smith. Carol was so furious she refused to get in the Chevy and, seething with rage, walked home. Yet none of this prevented her and Murray from having 3-in-a-bed sex with young Shannon 4 days later. On Sunday, the 3rd of August, Bundy made arrangements to meet her lover again in the parking lot of the Little Nashville Country Club. Her timing let her down, though, for when she turned up at the rendezvous as planned, she found Murray was already in his van and having sex with a woman called Avril Roy Smith. Carol banged on the door and Avril left. This chance encounter with yet another woman was to be the straw that finally broke the camel's back. Bundy and Murray drove away from the club together and parked a few blocks away, where they prepared for sex in the back of the van. Now undressed, Murray lay on his stomach while, crouching behind him, Bundy parted his buttocks and pushed her tongue into his anus. As Murray groaned with delight, she reached into her overextended waistband and drew out one of her Raven automatics. With her tongue still in place, she touched the muzzle of the gun to the back of Murray's head. He felt the cold steel and froze for an instant before she fired a single shot into his brain. She checked for a pulse and ascertained that he was still alive, so she fired again. Still, his heart kept on beating. Throwing the gun to one side, Bundy pulled out a heavy boning knife from her bag, which she repeatedly drove into his back. After a dozen stabs, he finally died. To complete her gruesome work, Bundy then slit open her victim's buttocks and mutilated his anus before hacking off his head. After rummaging through the van's cupboards, she scattered pornographic videotapes and magazines around the body. Emptying Murray's briefcase, she removed several Polaroid sex snapshots and took his keys and his gun before placing his head in a plastic bag. She then returned to her own car, which was still parked in the club's parking lot. Now, in the early hours of Monday, the 4th of August, she drove to a call box and telephoned her own apartment where Clark was sleeping. Doug Clark was in bed with Nancy Smith when the shrill ring dragged him out of a heavy sleep. Carol was whispering and giggling on the phone, he explained. And as the call continued, Nancy, who suffered from epilepsy, started a seizure. Doug told Bundy to shut up and get back home, and then he called for an ambulance. When Bundy arrived 5 minutes later, paramedics were already on the scene. After the ambulance left, Bundy took Clark to her car, where in the well of the front passenger seat was Murray's head in the plastic bag. The ragged and bloody stump was exposed, and Clark fell back and vomited. What with Nancy's fit and now this, it was all too much. But then Bundy coolly asked him if he would help her dispose of the mess. Like a complete fool, he agreed, despite the fact that he was about to start his shift at the Jergens soap factory within the hour. They drove off in the direction of the factory, with Bundy cradling the plastic-wrapped head in her lap. As they passed a pile of rubbish, she wound down the window and tossed the grisly article out. Murray's head was never seen again. 3 days later, on Tuesday, the 7th of August, the sexually insatiable Bundy invited Tammy Spangler, one of Murray's former girlfriends, over for dinner. Clark knew that Carol was trying to initiate another three-way sex session and declined to take part. In any case, he fancied the attractive woman himself, and he also feared for Bundy's state of mind. If she could do that to Jack, he said, what the fuck could she do to someone else? What about my fucking head? After the meal, Tammy left to go to work, and Bundy and Clark were now alone. Her sexual expectations had been disappointed, so she convinced Doug that they should drive into Hollywood and find another girl who would treat him to a hooker's blowjob. This was to be his birthday present from Bundy, and, reluctantly, he agreed. They drove to Highland Avenue, where they saw a suitable whore. The prostitute was called over and a deal was agreed. The girl's name was Kathy, but before she took payment she said, "I don't do nothing with no woman." Her concerns were allayed, and she climbed into the back seat followed by Clark, who left the driver's seat tilted forward against the steering wheel. This enabled Carol, who sat in the front passenger seat, to have a grandstand view. She gloated at the unedifying sight through her inch-thick spectacles. Clark described what happened next. I was on the left and Kathy was on my right, and twisted around with only her left buttock on the edge of the seat. She was working me up with her mouth and stuff like that. Then I noticed Carol fidgeting in her seat. She began heaving herself up and down, craning her neck to view the area around the car, like she was looking to see if there was anyone around. I saw Carol's hand reach around the seat, like she was going to grope Kathy. Then I saw the fucking gun. For an instant, I thought she was going to shoot me like she did Murray, but Carol placed the pistol to the back of the hooker's head and pulled the trigger. The bullet passed clean through the prostitute's head and struck Clark in the lower side of his stomach. Fortunately, it was only a flesh wound, but blood flowed onto his work shirt. I was shocked and freaking out, he explained. Carol told me to drive the fucking car while she climbed in the back, tore the clothes off the dead girl, and sexually assaulted her, all the while ranting that she was sure the dead girl would have liked it. When the body had been dumped, the two drove back to Bundy's apartment, where he changed his soiled clothes. He wouldn't see them again until the police arrested him. On Saturday, the 9th of August, the Van Nuys police received a complaint about a Chevrolet van that had been left unattended on Barbara Ann Street. The The caller also mentioned a foul smell emanating from the vehicle. Within minutes, a squad car arrived to investigate, and a police officer looking through one of the vehicle's windows saw a body in the rear. As the scene was being cordoned off, Detective Roger Pita climbed in to conduct a preliminary investigation, and, among the documents scattered about, he found a wallet which identified the male victim as John Robert Murray. Checking through their computer, the police learned that Murray's wife had reported him missing several days earlier, and officers were able to ascertain that he spent a lot of time with a woman called Carol Mary Bundy. The following morning, 2 detectives called at Bundy's apartment in Burbank. She invited them in, and they were introduced to Clark and Tammy Spangler. Clark and Bundy were taken downtown for further questioning, while Spangler followed in her car to bring them home after the interview. At the police station, the couple offered different alibis for the time of Murray's murder. Clark told the truth and said that Bundy had come home later that night. In a separate interview room, Bundy lied, claiming to have been at home all evening. She was adamant that she had not ventured out. Asked if she owned any firearms, Bundy said that she had recently sold a pair of pistols to a tall guy with red hair and a scar. The only name she could conjure up at short notice was Mike Hammer, which provided the officers with a moment's amusement. Then Tammy Spangler piped up. She told the detectives that she had seen Murray with a woman called Avril Roy Smith on the night of the murder. "Perhaps you'd better go talk with her," she suggested. With no solid evidence with which to hold Bundy, they allowed her and Clark to leave while they went in search of Avril, who subsequently gave a verifiable alibi to account for the time encompassing Murray's death. She said that when she left the Chevy van, Jack Murray was very much alive. As Avril departed, heading for the club where she spent the next 3 hours drinking with friends, she saw Carol Bundy climb into Murray's van. The homicide cops were now very interested in Bundy. The next day, while they were completing their paperwork for the arrest warrant, Bundy walked off her job at the hospital after confessing to colleagues that she was responsible for murdering and decapitating her lover. She told them that she was going back to her apartment to clean out the evidence before Doug gets home. As soon as she left, a senior official at the hospital reported Bundy's bizarre allegation in a frantic call to the police. On her way home, Bundy called in to see Clark at the soap factory during his shift. She asked the gatehouse security officer to summon him. When he came out, she told him that she had told the police everything. Clark was livid. "You crazy cunt," he snapped. "Get the fuck away from me." With Bundy now off the premises, Doug stormed back into the factory where he tried repeatedly to phone Detective Pita, who was not in his office. "Bundy was trying to fit me up with murder," he has said many times while protesting his innocence for the Sunset slayings. "And who the fuck is gonna believe a woman is doing all this murder stuff? And she had incriminating photos of me and Shannon hidden away. Blackmail. Yeah, that's what it fucking is." Just after 11 a.m. that morning, there was call to the Northeast Division of the LAPD, and a woman, Carol Bundy, asked to speak to homicide detectives. When Officer James Kilgore picked up the phone, the woman said, "Sometime way back, you were having a string of murders involving prostitutes in Hollywood." "We still are," replied Kilgore, totally unaware that the caller was recording their conversation. "Do you still have a code name on the girl by the name of Betsy Claudia?" Kilgore said he wasn't sure. "All right, never mind," said the caller. "Would you like your man today?" She talked about the murders and said that the weapon was a .22 caliber automatic. She said her man had told her he had it over 50 people. Then she said that she had killed a man named Jack Murray and admitted her involvement with several of the other murders. The one he cut her head off. Well, I played around with that one and the fat girl, Karen Jones, that he dumped off near the NBC studios. I was involved with that. Kilgore asked how many murders there had been. "Probably 12 or 14 total," came the reply. "But I can't verify all of them. I can only verify about 8 or 9. "And you helped him on some of them?" "Yes, I did," said Bundy. "Specifically how I got involved with it was a case of being scared to death because I knew that he had done these things. I felt I had to get involved. If I was involved, he'd have no reason to kill me." She then said she was calling to give herself in, and that her real name was Carol Bundy. Finally referring to the killer, she blurted out, "He's my boyfriend and his name is Douglas Daniel Clark." "Doesn't it make you feel bad that you killed somebody?" asked the detective. Bundy replied, amazingly, "The honest truth is, it's fun to kill people. And if I was allowed to run loose, I'd probably do it again. I have to say, I know it's going to sound sick, it's like going to sound psycho, and I don't really think I'm psycho, but it's kind of fun. It's like riding a roller coaster, not the killing, not the action that somebody died, because we didn't kill them in any way that they'd suffer. It was just killing them straight out." After making her telephone call, Bundy started rearranging her apartment, in the belief that she had a few hours to get things in order. She was bent on doing everything she could to incriminate Clark, but she had just minutes because detectives were about to arrive on her doorstep and arrest her. When they did, they conducted a careful search of the place. Almost immediately, Bundy held up a cardboard box that contained a pair of panties and assorted clothing. These items later proved to belong to an as yet undiscovered murder victim, who would later be tagged Jane Doe 28. The box also contained a purse belonging to another unidentified victim, Jane Doe 18. "This box belongs to Clark," she said. "And do you want to see what kind of guy Doug Clark is?" she asked, as she reached for her handbag on a table. An officer stopped her because he suspected that the bag might contain a gun, but inside was Bundy's keyring. She selected a key and offered it to one of the police officers to open the cabinet in Clark's bedroom. The cupboard contained a photo album of Clark with his numerous lovers, including photos of his poses with the 11-year-old Shannon. Also, hidden among various papers was a firearm sales receipt made out to a Juan Gomez, which later proved to be false. Meanwhile, Detective Peta had taken Clark in for questioning to Van Nuys police station, where he was held for hours, without water or food, and denied the use of the toilet. This treatment was illegal, especially when Clark had not even been told of the reason for his arrest. Indeed, at the time, he actually believed the arrest was all about Murray. When he was finally asked what he knew about this murder, to his credit, he admitted everything he knew. When he was asked why he hadn't gone straight to the police, Clark truthfully answered that Bundy had dozens of incriminating pictures of himself and Shannon, which she had used as a threat. When Peta produced the photograph album taken from his bedroom cabinet, Clark started to feel decidedly uneasy. The detective showed him a mugshot of the dead Cynthia Chandler, and Doug explained that he knew her personally. They talked about the prostitute murders, to which Clark retorted, "Someone is trying to lynch my ass, and I have hunch I know who it is." With little else to book him with, the police initially detained Clark on a holding charge of child molestation. This was a stopgap measure, for they had wider ambitions as far as Clark was concerned. There was certainly no evidence to say that he had been involved with the Sunset slayings, other than Carol Bundy's wild accusations. Nevertheless, Clark was held without his legal rights read to him for a further 8 hours because he demanded to see an attorney. It was now late at night, and when the police finally acceded to his request for legal representation, they informed him that all the lawyers had gone home, and it would take hours before one could be recalled. Then he was illegally moved to another police station 30 miles away. When an attorney did turn up at Van Nuys police station, Clark was no longer there. and no one seemed to know where he had been transferred. If the police were being uncooperative, then Clark was quite the opposite. He gave them permission to search his apartment, his motorcycle, and his place of work. "I gave them everything," Clark railed on. "I gave them my fucking boots, my fucking saliva, my fucking blood. I offered to take a polygraph, but changed my fucking mind 'cause I ain't never trusted the cops. I could see a fit-up coming from a mile off." While he was being grilled, Bundy was unloading her story on the detectives interviewing her. She corroborated Doug's denial of guilt for Murray's murder, saying that while she had shot Murray, another man, a psycho, had hacked the head off to remove the evidence of traceable bullets. Questioned as to why she had left the cartridge casings in the Chevy, she gave conflicting answers. At first, she stated that she didn't realize that the weapon automatically ejected the cases. Then, in a complete reversal, she said that she did realize that the cases had ejected from the weapon, but had simply forgotten to pick them up. During the initial and extremely thorough search of Murray's van, there was no record of any shell casings being found. Sometime later, however, a detective said that he had found a single shell casing in the van and that it had been fired from Bundy's chrome-plated Raven pistol. This discovery took on a more sinister aspect when it transpired that a police evidence envelope sealed and marked 2 shell casings found at unspecified sources had been torn open and one of the shell cases was missing. When she was asked why she had shot Murray, Bundy gave 4 vague reasons in rapid succession. The first was that he had stolen money from her. Second, because he had jilted her. Then she had shot him as he had planned to rape and kill Shannon. And finally, that he was going to report Doug to the police, accusing him of being the deadly Sunset Slayer. None of this made any sense whatsoever, but incredibly the police seemed inclined to believe her. Regarding which of the 4 stories, they didn't seem to know. With an attentive audience of good-looking police officers surrounding her, Bundy went on to say that she had been involved with the Kathy murder. The hooker had been shot while sitting in her Datsun. When the police told her that there was no forensic evidence of a shooting in the car, let alone a murder, she changed her account, saying that the crime had taken place in her Buick, which she had loaned to Clark. For his part, Doug says it was most certainly the Datsun because the car only had 2 doors, and he had to push the driver's seat forward to let the hooker in. Bundy went on to say that she had paid the hooker to give Clark a blowjob as a birthday present, but claimed that it was agreed that he would give her a signal as to when to shoot the prostitute in the head. Douglas Clark vehemently denies this, arguing, "No, man, I don't care who he is. Who would let a half-blind bitch reach over, shoot at the head of a hooker, suck in his cock, and hope like hell she didn't blow a hole in his knee or chest? I mean, what if her jaw locked shut?" Perhaps Clark has a valid point. When questioned about the Marano and Chandler murders, Bundy claimed that she had not been involved. She had merely learned of the crimes through Clark. It was Doug, she said, who had told her that he had shot both women in the head while they were giving him oral sex. During his interview at San Quentin, Clark was asked to comment on Bundy's claim. "You are pulling my pecker," he declared. "Do you think I'm fucking crazy, man? Some broad is blowing me off and I stick a gun to her head and blast them away. What about the fucking blood, man? What about my dick, man? I'd have been covered with the shit, and it would have been painted all over the inside of the fucking car." Bundy told the police that Doug dragged the bodies from the Buick and into his lock-up garage where he had sex with them. She added, "And it was because of this bloody mess in the car that Doug put it through a car wash." Clark has never denied washing the Buick, and, indeed, he even volunteered this information to the detectives, who confirmed that he had been to the car wash on the 21st of June, exactly a week after Bundy made her Betsy Claudia call to the police. Clark asserted everyone who saw or rode in the Buick from the 14th of June to the 21st of June, and there will be many who testify to this will say that the car was dry, and right after the car wash on the 21st of June, it was soaked and damp with steamy air for a full week. The point is, what fucking vehicle was she washing out just before the taped call to the police on the 14th of June? The Datsun was broken down, the Buick was dry, and only the Murray's Chevy van fits the details she made in that call. It later proved to be the case that indeed, Murray's van had been washed out after the first 3 murders. Although the police chose to ignore this vital evidence, that would prove beyond any doubt that Bundy was lying once again to save her own skin. Yet all of this begs the question as to why Clark washed the Buick in the first place. The answer lies in supporting evidence given by 4 other people who confirm that he is telling the truth. During the evening of the 20th of June, Clark visited Joey Lamphere, one of his many girlfriends, and when he left the woman's apartment, he accidentally reversed over an alley cat, crushing its hindquarters. He lifted the badly injured animal into the Buick where it crawled under the front passenger seat. Douglas Clark is known for his love of cats, and in the past had taken in several strays. He rescued many more from animal pounds and found new homes for them. Any cat lover will confirm, therefore, that it would have been in his nature to have been very concerned about this particular cat's welfare following the accident. Unfortunately, the cat died before he could reach a vet, so he placed the dead creature in a cardboard box and left it by garbage skip.